Yeah, I think you have to see.
Just
Yeah.
what you just said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When it's time to move on. It's time to move on.
Yeah. Because unfortunately, I think a lot of times where you have a forced termination is where that pastor is in pride, unwilling to move on, and
All right. I'm just gonna read something from. This is one of the books I have to read for this class.
Yeah, who wrote it?
It's Pastor's Handbook by.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Bizagno, or how do you say it? Cool.
All right, so I'm just gonna read from one of the questions. Find the right page. All right. And he goes and says, "So, my fellow Baptist pastor, before you change your system of..." He's talking about elder rule in this chapter. So it says, "So, my fellow Baptist pastor, before you change your system of church government, throw out the deacons, dismiss congregational government, and move to a system you call elder rule, and probably split your church in process. I encourage you to think a long time. It's far better to make the system work you already have, and you can." He's basically calling for deacon rule instead of elder rule, pretty much. So what are your thoughts on churches that are run by elder boards versus churches that are run by pastors and deacons?
Well, I would just kind of nuance the terminology here. I would see pastor, elder, shepherd, or pastor, elder, bishop is really defining the same office.
Yeah, because he talks about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
he says too.
Yeah, and in my mind, the elders, pastors, bishops, they're the ones who are charged with leading the church spiritually. And as I read the New Testament, I see the deacons as simply servants of the body. They're not those in charge with authority in terms of leading the flock. Now, certainly there to be men who are of integrity, and kind of the list there in First Timothy 3, but I don't see deacons as being those who are charged to lead the people. They're to serve the people. I mean, by the very name, by what their name is. So I would say, the elders, pastors are the ones who are charged to lead the church.
Yeah. He says the pastor is the pastor.
Yeah.
But what he's basically saying is, like, you're not supposed to have elder boards, I guess. Like, some churches specifically have elder boards who make all the decisions. I don't know if you know any.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly would be elder rule, and I know some churches that are like that. What we have here is we have elders who are charged to lead, and so we make decisions and that would affect the whole church. But there are probably 5 things that the church votes on. So we would kind of say, this is the direction we would say. Like example would be the budget. So the budget's prepared, and in an elder rule church, the church wouldn't vote on that; they would just implement it.
Yeah.
What we do is we create the budget, and then the church would vote. They vote on that and affirm what we've done. So there's about 5 things that the church does. Now, they don't vote on color the carpet or things like that. That's not what they vote on.
Yeah, well, minor things.
Yeah. So we call it elder led. But the congregation is still involved in some aspects of making decisions.
Right. 2. When looking back on your earlier years in ministry, what's one thing you would do differently and why?
I think probably the main thing would be just as it relates to decisions that I've made in terms of mainly personnel, people who are in charge of a ministry. And just thinking, like I said earlier, thinking ahead to say, okay, this is an important decision I need to really reflect on and get more counsel, and instead of, sometimes you're tired and you just you don't think through everything like you should. So I think that would be probably the thing I look back on, is just times where I should have made a better decision that then impacts not only me, but the church.
Yeah.
So.
How do you prefer to preach? Expositionally, topically, doctrinally, and why?
Yeah, I typically preach through books. So it's be expositionally, expositing the text.
Yep.
Try to verse by verse, because I don't have anything that can feed the people. I mean, I'm tasked with preaching the word, not preaching what I think. Now, nothing wrong. I mean, you can preach topically, but very much textually, or doctrinally. But for me, it's just easier to kind of map out where I'm going, and so next week, I'll be covering the next verses. So,
yeah.
Yep.
No, I think that's the way to go. That's just my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you had to rank the top 3 responsibilities of a pastor, what would they be, and why?
Well, I think the top one would be preach the word, because that's what feeds God's people. Second would be shepherding, being a good shepherd, and the third would probably be preaching the gospel to myself.
What do you mean by that?
Just in the sense that unfortunately, as you get caught, and maybe this is kind of your friend that it gets sermons off the internet, but it can become just an academic exercise instead of allowing the truth to impact you. It's just something you do, not something that impacts you. So, and not that that's an excuse for that guy, but I think just continually allowing the word to, I'm preaching to myself first before I ever get up.
Yeah, if it doesn't,
yeah.
If it doesn't really impact your life, it's not really gonna.
Yeah.
In the end, it's all masquerade.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, is the Great Commission an emphasis for this church? And if so, how?
Definitely, yeah. We our mission statement is we are desiring to make disciples of Jesus Christ for God's glory. So, the very reason why we exist is to see sinners transformed by God's grace into followers of Jesus Christ. And so that impacts then what we do. We gather on Sunday morning and at other times to be edified and encouraged and equipped, to then scatter. And as we scatter, we take the gospel with us, seeking to love others, not only in word, but in deed as well. So it's one Sunday school class that we have right now, it's seeking to prepare people to do that very thing, to go as they scatter and are salt and light in the place, in their workplace, in their neighborhood, in their families, wherever they interact with other people. It's taking that desire to make Christ known and the gospel proclaimed.
So, can you just give me some examples of what this church is doing to reach the lost in this community?
Yeah.
I guess that's what I'm really trying to say.
Okay, yeah. Well, we're not, I think, unfortunately, the church has become very program driven.
Yeah.
Since
because, a lot of churches really wait for the unsaved to come to them.
Yeah.
And that just don't really work.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do, like the thing, the one Sunday school we're doing, the class now is called Crupe, where we're equipping right now, going through these 9 arts of communication, where we're trying to help people develop relationships with unbelievers, with the purpose of inviting them to basically a Bible study where they can then interact with the God of the Bible, and because it's the Word that's going to change them. But they come. It's a venue where people. The reason why it's called Crupe is that people who are spiritually, God is doing a work in them. They're spiritually hungry, but they have questions, and it's a safe place where they can ask questions about the Bible, about spiritual things, without being squashed or turned away. So it's trying to not have people bring them to the church for some special event. Not that those things are wrong, but it's equipping the people to go into their community, go into our community, and and in my neighborhood have one of these Q places where the relationships that I'm developing, I'm engaging them, inviting them over. It takes a little bit more time, and it's more, I think, biblical in the sense that all of us are called to be evangelists. Now, some have the gift of evangelism, but all of us are
we're all called to evangelize,
to be missionaries in our spheres of influence. So, the other thing you have to recognize is more and more as we continue along in our culture is pushing Christianity to the margins. Fewer and fewer people are going to be willing to come to a church to hear me preach to them. It's just, I mean, why would an unbeliever do that? They won't. And as time goes forward, they're not going to.
Yeah.
But if I know you personally, and as we're engaging in conversation, I'm seeking to meet your needs that you have, conversations are going to happen. And so if I'm equipped and am praying and am purposing to share Christ with you, then that's going to happen. Now, part of that is, we have to be praying that God's going to open the eyes of the unbeliever, and we're saying, Lord, I'm willing to be inconvenienced to do whatever it takes to seek to change my schedule so that I can try to reach you. But part of that too is just, we already have normal rhythms of life. We all eat usually 3 meals a day. So could you take one of those 21 meals per week and invite your neighbor over, and engage them? And you're not doing anything necessarily different, but you're engaging them in your life, and it's providing opportunities for conversation to then share Christ. So I think it's just repeatedly trying to help our people stay focused on that, because really, us having some special event, we've had plenty of special events, and what happens typically is the people running those things get burnt out, because you've got 20% of the people doing 80% of the work year after year, and what fruit comes out of that? Well, if I'm not building relationships with unbelievers, it just is another gathering of believers to hear me preach or hear somebody else come up and get up and speak. Now, I'm not saying those things are bad. Certainly, we're probably still in the Bible Belt enough that you could do those things, and some unbelievers would come. Typically, those who have had exposure at a young age to Christianity, maybe going to church with their grandparent or even their parents. But more and more, there are kids in my neighborhood who had no idea who Jesus is. They didn't. They just haven't grown up in that. We have an Awana program. It's another avenue to be able to invite people to, and so we've invited our neighbor kids to come. And now they are hearing the gospel on a weekly basis. But that, I think, is a little bit unique in the sense that parents are maybe possibly more apt to have had some type of religious background to allow their kids to go. We have some other neighbors who they're not much religious background, and their daughters come once. So it's those kind of people that are more and more not going to have really any reason to come to church, some event at a church, outside of you and me developing relationships with them. And I think the thing that's most convicting is I'm really selfish. In the sense of what it really takes for us to reach people around us who are unbelievers is loving them enough to change my schedule. And I don't know about you, but I'm busy enough with my own stuff. But it means me wrestling with the reality that Jesus was willing to come and interrupt his schedule so that I could know relationship, be reconciled to him. So it all goes back to the gospel. Sorry, that's kind of a long answer.
No, hey, that's a good answer. All right, that's the 5 questions that I
was it okay?
Yeah, they had 13, and I had to make 5 of my own.
Okay.
So I don't have any more questions. Do you have any personal advice or anything? Any questions you want to ask me or anything I can write down here? I don't have anything else.
No, I guess just more would be as it relates to you're going to graduate here in another year.
I would have graduated